Again, this is the confirmation by the United States of the killing of Abu Bakr al Baghdadi. This took place in a night raid in Syria. We're going to cross over to Ontario, joined by Jason Unruhe. Jason, thanks so much for being with us. Overall, your take on what Trump has just said.
Well, I've sat through and I've watched everything Trump has had to say with this situation, and I got to say that there are some glaring statements that he made. But one specific thing I wanted to mention was that when Trump was talking about all of the countries who had aided in fighting ISIS, Daesh, at no point did he recognize the efforts of Iran. He mentioned absolutely everybody who could possibly have been involved, with the sole exception of Iran. And Iran has played a tremendous role fighting Daesh, not just within Syria itself, though the lion's share of it being done there, but their advisors, technology efforts. For example, the oil that Iran has been sending the government of Syria in order to be able to carry on the war effort itself, which the U.S. says that they want. As the Syrian government was trying to fight ISIS, they were also embargoing the oil industry of Syria, undermining their ability to do so. And then they turn around and they attack Iran for sending oil to Syria, which they need for that very same effort. So there was a very glaring absence of any mention of Iran from his statement, or he mentioned that Iran would be happy that ISIS is gone. Of course, we would all be very happy that ISIS is gone, but he deliberately, and I almost think maliciously, left out Iran's efforts in trying to deal with the threat that is ISIS. Now, another point that I do find very interesting is the amount of cooperation that the United States is highly suspected of having with involvement in Daesh itself, and then much of it revealed that Israel was giving medical care to ISIS fighters, or particularly high-ranking ones, as during the worst of it inside of Syria. This has gone completely ignored. U.S. weapons have been found in the hands of ISIS fighters. As they did their propaganda videos, there was a big outrage that you could see the lot numbers and the manufacturers of the weapons right on the cases as they were displaying them in a propaganda effort, and they were revealed to have come from United States weapons manufacturers. And then, of this course, raises the great question as to exactly how did they get a hold of these weapons. Probably a very long story that we're not going to get the answer to for a very long time.
Well, I mean, sorry to interrupt you, Jason. I mean, we also have analysts that have said in the past that actually al-Baghdadi himself, when we look at his history, where he came from, and that he was incarcerated by the Americans for a while, there are suspicions of him actually, some say, working with the CIA to begin with. So it's interesting roots when we look at the whole Daesh creation and those who have played a very big role inside of Daesh and helping Daesh. Many would say that the United States has played a very big role. I mean, we had reports coming from Iraq and Syria during various clashing. There were some of the Syrians and also some of the Iraqis were saying that actually the United States bombed areas to make sure a lot of times that Daesh would get away, that actually they would try to help clear the way for them to get away many times when they could. So there seems to be a lot of confusion or lack of clarity on the United States' role that it has played and continues to play with the remnants of Daesh. Your take?
Oh, yes, it certainly has been the case. There's been a lot of very suspicious actions, which a lot of people have noted that is beyond any measure of coincidence. This has to be a an effort on the part of the United States to protect those Daesh fighters. Some of them were very close to being destroyed by Syrian forces, and then all of a sudden, these airstrikes from the U.S. come in and aid their escape. But we've never really had that full smoking gun until recently, when these weapons were broadcast. There's also a great deal of information that came out from WikiLeaks that highly links Hillary Clinton in her role as Secretary of State to a lot of the ISIS activities that were going on, a lot of the materials that they were managed to get a hold of. I mean, a lot of them were driving around brand new trucks from various auto manufacturers from around the world. There's a big question of how these got into a country which had tremendous sanctions on them. There is also the famous photograph of John McCain with al-Baghdadi that has been circulated around the entire world, yet has been mysteriously missed by the mainstream media. And this has always been a very important point that a lot of people in alternative media have been pointing out, that John McCain did have a relationship with al-Baghdadi. He had frequently gone out, many times spoken in support of what he claimed are resistance fighters inside of Syria. And one of those was al-Baghdadi, who went on to become the leader. When we consider that, and consider he was in previous U.S. custody and then released, I mean, this is more than simply some conspiracy theorist idea. These are some very serious facts on the ground which do demonstrate that there has been a large level of cooperation between the United States and Daesh. There has also been a very large Saudi connection as well, one that has been more financial than, say, material that has been coming from the United States.
Well, it's interesting when we look at, we hear the United States talking today about killing al-Baghdadi, and we think about Daesh and how Daesh has basically been destroyed, especially in this region, by Iran, by Iraq, by the Syrians, by Hezbollah, and they have achieved unbelievable victories. And yet that was not made out to be such a big deal. And then we hear today, all of a sudden, Baghdadi has been killed. And we hear Trump just continually going on and on and on, making it such an unbelievable event, when again, we know that the United States was actually partially involved in the development of Daesh to begin with. Let's just talk about the hypocrisy in all of this that you mentioned as far as Iran, and the lack of credit going to the Islamic Republic and its allies for basically being the real ones who've destroyed Daesh.
Well, it's really nothing new for the United States to try to take the lion's share of credit for when they hadn't done that. We saw this with World War II, when the Soviets carried the brunt of the war, and the United States has a tendency to rewrite history as though they were the ones who did the lion's share of the work. But there has been numerous, even some very open, describing alliances between the United States and so-called moderate rebels inside the country, who seem to carry out the same kind of crimes that I guess in their opinion, the more extreme kinds of terrorists inside the country were carrying out, using children as human shields, all kinds of, like really nasty stuff. And when we combine that with a lot of the phony allegations of chemical weapon use inside the country, many of them coming from ISIS areas, even some coming from, the white helmet, largely a propaganda ambulatory tool used in the country, largely for the al-Nusra Front, which is very heavily connected, is connected to al-Qaeda itself operating inside the country. So there's been a great deal of not just military, financial, material, and political support given to many of these, so-called opposition groups inside of Syria, which have essentially just carried out a campaign of terrorism across the country for the last some odd 7 years. And yet the United States wants to congratulate itself for taking down al-Baghdadi, which I think that a lot of analysts suspect they probably could have done so a long time ago. I mean, there's a great deal going on behind the scenes that we're not seeing. it took far less time to find Saddam Hussein, and yet this guy managed to elude the United States for much longer. I mean, this
Okay,
is all
Jason, thank you
very
so much.
suspicious.
Yeah, kind of reminiscent of what happened to bin Laden and the whole thing, and then dropping his body in the water and all of that. Anyway, thanks so much for being with us, Jason Unruhe out of Ontario. And thank you so much for being with us, viewers. Don't go away. I'll be back in less than 3 minutes with the top headline news this hour. Stay tuned.